Welcome to Great Aspirations, Wellspire Advisors podcast series on life, wellness, and financial advice. Each episode shares the experiences of extraordinary people whose stories inspire others to think big, find balance, and explore the possibilities of achieving health, wealth, and happiness. And now, here's your host, the CEO of Wellspire Advisors, Michael LaMena.
Welcome to Great Aspirations. I'm Mike LaMena, CEO of Wellspire, and I'm grateful that you're joining us for another episode of Season 4. This season is centered on a simple but powerful idea, the power of giving. At Wellspire, we believe that giving is measured by the impact that we have on others, by the lives that we touch. And no one embodies that belief more than our guest today, retired Lieutenant Colonel Robert Grunewald. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Grunewald is a decorated U.S. Army officer recognized for his extraordinary bravery during the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. Stationed at the Pentagon, he guided numerous people to safety through smoke, utter darkness, and fire, including one colleague who was hanging onto him by his belt. For his efforts on that day, he was awarded the Soldier's Medal. Mr. Grunewald retired from the federal government in 2022 after serving 22 years as an active duty Army officer and 12 more as a DoD civilian. He's also spent 7+ years in the private sector, working for Perot and Dell Systems, and in the medical services and senior living field. He has more than 25 years experience in information technology as a manager and in more broadly office administration. Mr. Grunewald is also, outside of his professional endeavors, a state-certified Virginia high school basketball official and clock operator, and a high school football clock operator. He often gives speeches and presentations on 9/11 and volunteers significant time as a docent at the Pentagon 9/11 Memorial. He and his wife also often foster dogs for the Oldies But Goodies Cocker Spaniel Rescue. Rob, it is such a pleasure to have you. Thank you for being a guest on our podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me. This is an unusual pleasure when I get to talk to somebody as yourself. I don't get this opportunity quite often.
Well, we appreciate it. And like I said in the introduction, this season is all about service, living a life of service, meaning, impact, purpose. And, you know, when I look at your career, before we talk about the events specific to 9/11, you know, it's very clear that service has been a common theme throughout all aspects of your professional and professional career and personal activities. When you think back to the early years, you know, what first drew you to a life of service?
Well, it's an interesting question. My dad was born in Germany, and he came over to the United States in the mid-1930s with his sister and his parents. Being Jewish wasn't a great thing in the mid-30s. So he came over here and he became a naturalized citizen in the mid-30s. And in the 40s, he went back to fight as a United States soldier against what was then his fatherland. So my dad had this military in him and this service in him, and his father actually fought for the Germans in World War I. So it's a very diametrically opposed service to one's country. My dad had always talked about his military time and the fight that they had just to survive during that time. So I'd always had it in the back of my mind that I thought it would be something interesting to do. Then in college, I was unsure. I was one of these teenagers who was, what do they call it? I didn't know where I wanted to go. I didn't have any guidance. I was taking all these common classes. And my parents actually took me to Philadelphia. And I took one of these batteries of tests, thousands of questions, choose this or that or what and everything. And they spit it out and it said, you should either join the military or be a policeman. And I said, well, how about if I do both? and I
Oh,
joined the Army and became a military policeman in the early 1980s. So it was a lot of being undecided what I wanted to do, having a little thought on what I might want to do, and then being tested and given some recommendations, and it all turned out to be very good advice.
I mean that's fantastic to having seen your father, right, come to the country because of some of the things that were happening and then to go to fight for the independence, the liberty, the freedom. I mean that is service driven from a sense of values, right?
Absolutely, agreed.
That's
The
great.
values that my parents had, and the values that I have, hopefully, the next generations can get some of these values. I think it's very important that we don't lose our moral compass here.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about it, some of those, formative experiences, having seen what your father did, I love the fact that, when you were in college, you were a little bit uncertain. I was the same. I was always envious of people that knew exactly what they want to do. I saw a multiplicity of opportunities. Actually, when I graduated, I did a year of volunteer work as a teacher in the Bronx because I had a desire to give back, and that was a way to express it. So it resonates with me that you were a little bit uncertain, but you saw that, this test validates that, service is compelling. What was that early experience in the military like? Did you find, what you were looking for in that experience?
I think I did. It's one of these things where, you get this stereotype of, accountants sitting at their desks, and bookkeepers over here and teachers in a classroom. Well, being in the military, the world is your classroom. And so my first tour, I was sent to Germany. And what an experience for a 20-year-old kid to go to Germany and see, in the United States now, we're going to celebrate our 250th birthday. And that's really cool. But I was seeing stuff that was BC. Okay. So it gives you a perspective of what's out there in the world. So it gives you a different view of the United States, and going to like downtown Alexandria here and seeing something from the late 1700s or 1800s. And now you're actually walking on cobblestone streets in Europe, and going to my grandfather's hometown and saying, maybe he sat right here where I'm
Wow.
sitting, so many years ago. So it really opens your eyes to what else is out there, and I encourage people to travel if they have the means and can, and see those sites and things you might not see at your home.
That's great. I mean, that idea of broadening perspectives and, context, putting ourselves at a point in time in the context of longer history is incredibly valuable. So when you look back on your career, your military service, the DoD, how that's carried, onward into private enterprise, do you view your career through the lens of service? Do you view it as, a calling, a responsibility? How would you, kind of having gotten the perspective of looking back on your career, how would you define it?
It's an interesting question because I never looked at it through that lens.
Yeah.
The first lens I looked at it was I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then the Army said, well, how about if we pay for your college? And I said, that'd be very cool. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I only have to give you 4 years, and you can stand on your head for 4 years. And then 4 years turned into 10, and then 10 years turned into 20. And it got to be ingrained in you, this discipline, the need to do things bigger than yourself, the satisfaction of being part of a team, part of a group. I often envy people in this area. I look at them, building a high rise, or building a bridge, or building an apartment complex, and just driving by that building in like 10 years and saying to your kids, hey, I built that.
Right. I did
I
that.
built
It's
that. That
tangible.
is part of me. So those kinds of things got me thinking a little bit. And I will tell you, and quite honestly, I think I matured later in life. I was undecided and kind of undisciplined in college. And I didn't start seeing the bigger picture really until I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and started to see things in a different lens, the giving and the growing, and that type of thing. So, like you talked about earlier, I didn't know when I was in high school that I wanted to be a doctor,
Sure.
and then I went down that road. I grew up late.
But you found in a career a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, right? And I think that becomes, compelling. And I think, as human beings, I think we crave that connectivity. We want to belong. And I think, the level of loyalty to an organization like the military is off the charts, right? For people that choose like you did to make a career, it does become about more than just yourself, right? It's not a job. There's an underlying foundation of a bigger sense of purpose. Is that fair?
It's like being a firefighter or a policeman. I think if you're in that clique, in that group, unless you've been there, it's hard for you to relate to that type of thing. So it is a calling. I spent 20 years, about 20 years in the Pentagon, working for some very senior level people. And so when I watch the news at night and hear people talking about it, I kind of chuckle sometimes because they don't know of what they say, because it's different when you're living it,
Sure.
and you have to give so much, and others just want to take and belittle and put you down and those kinds of things, and they don't understand, and that's a big part of it, is not understanding. And if you understand it a little bit more, then you can give of yourself to a bigger cause.
I appreciate that perspective. And you mentioned the Pentagon. I mean, let's go back to that day, September 11th, 2001. I don't think any one of us, I was in New York at the time, so it was very close to what happened at the World Trade Centers. I don't think anyone could have expected, envisioned, what happened. But when you found yourself, in that moment, talk to us a little bit about the experience. And then I'd like to dig a little bit into, how you responded the way you did.
Yeah. So the thing that I always start off with when we talk about this is you got to remember, now this is about 25 years ago. So things are different. Things are way different. The Pentagon didn't even have a lot of television sets. I like to call it the interweb was in its infancy. We didn't have Fox News and CNN and cable and everything. You had flip phones. You didn't have cameras on your phone unless they were specially put in there. So things were a lot different 25 years ago than they are now. And kids today don't necessarily understand that.
In a hyper-connected world, like it's hard to envision how disconnected people were when the rudimentary cell phones we had didn't work, and you were lost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they didn't work that day.
Right.
So we went to this meeting prior to 9 o'clock. Military, you get to every place early. We had a 9 o'clock meeting. So we get there, 5 of 10 of 9, and we're in a conference room, probably no different than the conference room that you have there, or in your offices, or in many offices. And we didn't know what was going on in New York. We had no idea what was going on. And we are just going about our business, sitting in this room, a bunch of executive officers talking about, personnel and leadership, and taskers that are due, and deadlines that are coming up, and awards and promotions and hiring actions and all those administrative things. And then I heard a little rumble, and the room I was in literally blew up. I was sitting as I am here today, and the plane came in from my right rear, but the fire came in from my left front. And the we had one of those popcorn ceilings that immediately exploded, and the room went instantaneously black. And now what do you do? So it's one of those situations that you hope you never are exposed to, but now what do you do? And my first reaction, believe it or not, I was mad. I was the information technology officer for this office. I had helped build and engineer this entire office of 300, 400 people. And now there's a fire because a construction worker had hit a gas line, or an electrical worker, and GD it, I have to build this all over again. And then the room went instantaneously black and started filling with smoke. And that thought, that selfish thought, left my mind.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. Like, we really didn't have context for what was happening. And to go to a place that at the time maybe sounded like a logical explanation, all of a sudden that starts to change. And the magnitude of what's happening starts to become a reality. Is that fair?
Absolutely. The building had just been renovated and reconstructed, and we hadn't been in there that long. So I thought it was a construction accident. But
Wow.
then self-preservation comes in, and I have this colleague, and you never know what you're going to do. When an incident happens, are you going to be a Sergeant York? Are you going to be an Audie Murphy? Or are you going to be someone who runs away? Are you going to be a fireman who runs toward? I had a friend who was sitting at the end of the table, and her first reaction was to get under the table and wait for help to come, which is not a bad reaction, unless that might not happen. So I didn't know where was safe, and none of us did. But I jumped on the table and crawled down, and she grabbed onto my belt, and we proceeded to crawl a good distance, weaving our way, pushing chairs out of the way, tables out of the way, file cabinets that fell over, printers that fell off the table, and really literally hoping we didn't run out of luck, because you can go crawl under a cubicle and get stuck there. You can get turned around and not know where you're going. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And unfortunately, a lot of my colleagues ran into that and are no longer here today. But me and her and several others were able to negotiate our way out of this burning blaze, and the fire was burning about 1,600 degrees Celsius above us. Fahrenheit above us, because it had 5,000 pounds of jet fuel. And so, we didn't know any of that, and we just crawled until we hoped we didn't run out of luck.
Well, your response was truly heroic, and there's people that are alive today because of it. When you look at that, and you started to talk a little bit about this, is it how you react in a crisis? Is that formed based upon years of training? Is it instinct that kicks in the moment? Like, what do you think contributed to your ability to respond the way you did in a crisis like that?
I think for me, it was both of what you said, instinct
Yeah.
as well as training. But that said, you could do it. Somebody else could do it. Until you get in that situation, you never know what your reaction is going to be. You could be trained in it. I had a soldier once, and there was an accident, and one of my drill sergeants sat down and froze, and he was very disappointed in his response, because that's not what he was supposed to do. What you're supposed to do and what you do are two totally different things, sometimes. So some of it was instinct, some of it was saving a friend who was in desperate need of support, and the other of training, of how do I get out, and knowing that sitting there was not a good answer. But I wouldn't say you require that training in order to all of a sudden be a hero. You hear about it on a train station. Somebody runs over and catches a baby falling out of a window. Some people, like I said, they just have it sometimes, and you're fortunate. For me, I was fortunate.
Well, you clearly have it, sir, and I appreciate what you did in that moment, and to not just think about yourself, but to think about those around you. I mean, your life up until that point had been grounded to some degree in a culture of service, and clearly that showed up in a point of crisis. Post 9/11, like how is living a life of service and purpose evolved for you after that, event? I mean, it was impactful in so many different ways on so many different people. But for somebody like you that was already living a life of service, like, how did it shift your perspective? How did that influence the way you've kind of carried on, in your life for the, almost 25 years post that, event?
Well, I think a lot of things you take for granted, you don't take for granted anymore.
Yeah.
You just don't. Number one for me, obviously, is health. Without health, you have nothing. And then you get into family. And my family became, so much more important to me than it was before. And that's I guess I don't know, a unique or a disappointing. Your family should always be up there, but it even became more so. My in-laws after 9/11 literally drove down from Philadelphia, gave me a hug, and drove home. I mean, that
Wow.
they just wanted, to give you a hug. So health is number one. Family, of course, is number two. And then what can I do to help others? And I thought that my life might have been a little selfish, and that I hadn't been giving enough to others. And that's when I joined some of these groups, Pay It Forward 9/11 and 9/11 A Day of Service, and more specifically the Pentagon Memorial and Visitors Education Center. Because as we alluded to earlier, the next generation, they don't understand what we experienced, and you're staring at your TV, and this otherworldly thing is happening. And without getting political, we also don't understand what's going on in the world today, because we're watching it on TV and it's like a video game.
Right.
But when it hit home on 9/11, all of a sudden we were aghast. Countries overseas, and it doesn't matter who it is, Bosnia and Ukraine and the Czech Republic, or Israel and Lebanon and whatever it is, we see it on TV, the bombs and the fires and everything, and it doesn't resonate with us because it's so far away. But but for the grace of God go I. And what happens if I live there? And every day we would be under this constant threat or this constant barrage. It's very, very difficult. So I became a little more unselfish because I had seen things in the Middle East. I spent some time in the Gaza and the West Bank on military. So I saw in Bosnia, these people, they're lucky if they have electricity. They're lucky if they have, potable water, if they have toilets. So when that next generation comes to the memorial, I like to tell them, you may not think you have a lot, but trust me, you do. You do. And as Americans and kids growing up, they don't understand how much they really have compared to a lot of other folks that aren't as fortunate, not only in the community, but in the world.
Look, I think that perspective is critical. It's easy in our lives where we're surrounded by, wealth and access to technology and information and so many unbelievable things, to have that perspective of how fortunate we are. So, talk to me a little bit more about some of those organizations, because I know coming out of 9/11, I mean, it was a terrible tragedy, but it did galvanize people. It did knock down, barriers, and it didn't become about Democrat or Republican. Again, not to become political, but boundaries were gone. And as Americans, we kind of came together and said, like, we want to be of service to each other. And so talk to me a little bit about your experience with that coming out of 9/11 and how it's transpired into some of the organizations that you talked about, like the 9/11, Day of Service. Because what I liked about, that when I was researching it is, that put a very positive spin on how do we take from tragedy something that pays it forward in a very constructive, productive, and positive way.
Your point is well taken. When I'm talking to the young kids today, and I see their parents behind them, I say almost exactly what you did. On 9/12, there weren't Republicans and Democrats. There weren't whites and blacks and Hispanics. There weren't Jews and Muslims and Christians and Catholics. There were Americans. And as Americans, if we put our mind to it, we can do anything. And when you went over across the water to Capitol Hill or Congress and they had a vote, it was 100 to nothing. Imagine that. Imagine that, 100-0. Everybody agreed. But as you also talked about, there was patriotism. Please and thank you. There were no honking the horns. People would hold the doors for each other. There's a lot of courtesy. Everybody had an American flag. At the Pentagon, your major corporations were dropping off computers and laptops and printers and food and sandwiches and saying, take what you need. So everybody was in the giving spirit because we were
Yeah, out of
all.
this incredible tragedy, all of a sudden there's this alignment and unification and that spirit of giving. So how do we sustain that? How do we, I know some of the organizations, right, that you've been involved with are trying to do that. One, the context and the legacy so that younger generations actually do appreciate what happened on those days, but also that culture. We talk a lot about a life of service, purpose, meaning, fulfillment. You yourself articulated that like you felt like you became less selfish coming out of it. Talk to me about some of the volunteer experiences you've had and how those organizations are trying to perpetuate that commitment to service.
Yeah, well, 9/11 is one of the largest days of service and volunteering in the country today. And, we go to Capitol Hill and we try to get, finances for this thing because a lot of these are, they're organizations that are, they're not profits. So I've been on Capitol Hill. I've been to shows trying to, get finances and everything for this. But it's important that we get that next generation because the last people from Pearl Harbor are passing away. The last people from World War II are passing away. And now it's just in a history book. So how do we keep this alive so we don't have another 9/11 so that we concentrate on it? And I think it's up to you and me and organizations such as this that are of this age and of that generation to pass that on and try to get that volunteerism and don't get people like me who waited until their late 20s and 30s, get them earlier to show compassion, to show the willingness to help, the kindness, and those type of things. So I think it's incumbent upon us to pass it on to the next generation so we can do things like the 9/11 day when we pack food for the needy. I mean, it's a process, and organizations and corporations and businesses send their entire team. It's like a team building operation because
Absolutely.
you're stuffing packages for the needy, and it only takes an hour or two of your time. But who does it impact? It impacts somebody that you don't know, that you don't see, that's not as well off as you. So to pass on our knowledge, to pass on our experience, to pass on our goodness and our kindness, I think it is incumbent upon ourselves as well as corporations and organizations to help perpetuate that.
I appreciate that. Just want to shift gears. Your volunteer work or your work in the sports space, right? As a clock operator and high school basketball referee, high school football clock operator. Talk to me a little bit about that. All three of my daughters, I have three daughters, they all played sports, and it was a big part of their childhood. Talk to me about your motivation and what that's meant to you as
What
part
kind of
of,
what kind of parent were you? Did you sit on your hands or did you yell at the officials?
I think I was mostly constructive.
Mostly
So, yeah,
constructive.
yeah,
Yeah, my sons all played sports and I coached them in
yeah,
basketball and baseball and soccer and all that stuff until they hit a certain age where I couldn't do that anymore because I had to pass them on to
sure.
professional coaches. And then one day my son was playing in a basketball game and the officials didn't show up. And I said, I'll officiate. And as parents and coaches, about 75 or 80% of the rules. It's that last 15 or 20% that you're yelling
Sure.
about from the crowd that you don't really know about.
Yeah.
So we have to put up with that. And you need.
I ultimately think every parent of kids playing sports should take a stint as a referee to gain the perspective of what they do and how difficult the job is. It is not easy, and we all get emotional about our kids. So first of all, thank you for doing that. I mean, sports wouldn't happen without people that are willing, to do that. And it's not an easy job. So I appreciate that.
I think refereeing has some similarities to information technology call center. When you're tier one, when you're customer service, or at the Walmart or at the Walgreens, and you're the customer service, and that irate customer comes up to you, you need to have a thick skin and a thick head. You just do, because it's part of the territory.
Sure.
And it takes time, just like anything else. Being the vice president, the CEO, you just don't walk in and know everything. I was an adult, and I was once accused of being a racist at a 13-year-old's basketball game. And I was an adult, and I was mortified that a parent would consider me that, especially since everybody on the court was the same race, and I had no idea who she was talking about.
Well, people lose perspective, right?
Fact
Yeah.
that somebody would think I was a racist hurt my heart.
Oh.
It just did, even as an adult. So I really enjoy working with the kids and helping them out. I teach young officials today in Springfield Youth Club here. So we're trying to get that next generation, similar to volunteers, that next generation of people wanting to be officials. And it's not for everybody, as you point out.
Right.
Everybody should come on the court and do it, but it's not for everybody, because if you don't
Right.
have a thick skin and a thick head, you don't like being yelled at or being criticized and those kind of things. So it's not easy, but really, you get personal satisfaction of calling a good game, or you even feel badly when you miss a call, and it hurts you that you could have done better. I've lost sleep over a call in a high school basketball game. I've lost sleep. So I like working with the young people. I like working with the coaches. I like working with, at our hometown, I sit up in the crowd with the games I'm not working, and I sit with my buddy and some of his friends, and I explain the game to them, the part, that 20% that they don't know.
Sure.
Because it's easy to yell 3 seconds over the back moving screen, and there's no such thing in high school sports. But everybody yells it. Everybody yells it.
Well, look, I'd also like to talk a little bit. You and your wife are also involved in dog adoption efforts. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, my wife, that's my wife's thing. I just tag along and be the good husband there. My wife is really into dogs, and we have 2 ourselves, but she got involved in this oldies but goodies Cocker Spaniel thing, and it's really a shame. There's a lot of people, somebody gets older and goes into a home and can't take their dog. Somebody abandons a dog. Somebody passes away and the family doesn't want to take a dog. Somebody adopts another dog and they don't get along, and those type of things. So they don't know what to do. And this group, like many other groups in this country, comes in and takes these dogs and says, we're going to find a good home for them. And so we foster dogs until they find a permanent home. And a lot of people say, how can you do that and not fall in love with these dogs and keep them all?
Right.
We've had a couple of failures where we've kept the dogs. We've lost, but to see someone who wants, and some of these dogs are damaged. Some of them are missing an eye, some of them can't hear, some of them, the last one we just had. Can you imagine an 11-year-old dog with a kidney disease that has less than a year to live, and somebody drove from New Jersey all the way to Virginia to pick up that dog and take them back to their home and nurse them until they can't do it anymore? As we talked about earlier, and it comes full circle, there's a lot of goodness out there in the world. And we see it with these foster dogs and with these people that hire dogs that have been hurt or come from puppy mills or whatever, or have been abandoned or left or given up. And so there's a lot of really good people out there who are willing to give of themselves. We're just kind of an intermediary to try to get these dogs adoptable and try to bring down some of their anxieties and those type of things, and help them find a good home. It's really worthwhile. But when you get a good dog, it's hard to give up a good dog. I'll tell you that.
Well, part of what strikes me in that is, maybe not necessarily an initial passion of yours, something that's important to your wife, but I hear the way you talk about it, and it is absolutely infused with passion, with energy, with commitment. So, when I pull back the lens and look at your life, a couple things strike me. One, out of the uncertainty of what do I want to do, with my career, you find a structure that has a huge element of service in it. And when I think about your career, whether it's your military work, your work, in the DoD, as a civilian, your corporate work, your heroic activities on 9/11, the service work that you've poured, countless hours and energy into related to 9/11, but also through something related to, dogs that your wife is interested in. It really is, a tapestry that says service has been a constant component of your life. It has been a defining aspect. And when I think about a life of purpose, meaning, fulfillment, I get inspired by lives of service. When you look back at yours, I mean, do you view it through that lens? Do you see the same connectivity? You've done amazing things, and that thread seems to have always been there, being of service to others and having impact on others. I'd appreciate your reflection on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if anybody has synopsized my life or career in the Reader's Digest version that you did, and you made it sound pretty good. So I appreciate that. I don't know that I looked at it in that lens. That said, I know I'm a better person now than I was 20 years ago. As I said earlier, I did mature, in my opinion, I did mature later in life. So when you have the means and then the health and then the time, what do you do with that? Do you sit home and watch TV and worry about me? And there's a lot of people out there that do that. We talk about I read something, Dave Barry was talking about something a little while ago, just a great columnist. And then I was reading something else who was talking about people don't take selfies anymore. They take wealthies. They want to show, look at me, look at what I'm doing. I'm out on a boat. I'm eating a nice meal. I'm out, I'm out on a yacht. I'm out flying around the world, and that's well and good for some folks, but that's not while I'm here. If you go out to my page, it's usually pictures of me and my wife, pictures of 9/11, and pictures of dogs. I mean, that's what my life has boiled down to, and I am happy. I am happy with that. I live a very simple life, and I enjoy what it is that I do. Right now, I am a part-time concierge at a senior living community right up the street. It is one of the greatest jobs I've ever had, and heck, I could live there. I mean, that's how old I am. But to help these people, to see these people, to learn about them, the lives that they've lived and what they've done, very, very worthwhile to me. I hardly make any money, couldn't care less.
It's not what it's about, right? It's about the
I like
impact on
being
other
out
people.
there
Right.
and helping people, like we talked about building the Wilson Bridge or whatever it is. I like to say, I will do anything for anybody as long as it doesn't cost me any money.
Look, I appreciate that. And, I think it's so easy in today's world to be caught up in all the financial aspects of success, and to have success, be defined by that. Look, I work in financial services and financial security. It's an important part of what we do with all the clients that we work with. But I think where we've tried to always focus is, living your best life isn't about a dollar sign. It's not about an AUM figure. It's about living a life of purpose, meaning, fulfillment, impact. And that is different for everybody. But when I hear about your life, your career, your activities outside of the professional landscape, it is very clear to me that you've touched literally thousands of lives through your activities, and some in just, incredibly heroic ways on 9/11, but you didn't stop there. It's carried forward, and it's been a consistent part of so much of what you've done. So on behalf of Wellspire, I'd like to just thank you for your service in the military. Thank you for your heroic actions on 9/11 and for being a model of what it means to live a life of service and impact countless lives in ways big and small, right? I mean, one of the things that strikes me is you literally saved individuals' lives on 9/11, but you speak as passionately about what you're able to do, in terms of being a greeter, at a home for, the elderly. I mean, that kind of impact in things big and small, I think really is a definition of a life of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment. So
Well,
thank you.
I appreciate that. You've given me, believe it or not, you've given me a lot to think about because I never, I guess, sat out here and looked down upon myself and said, what does life have meaning? That said, I don't want to downplay the financial part of it and the ability of giving me freedom to do some of these things and to volunteer and to take time outside. When I was traveling to some countries and seeing, people with ox carts and people without a roof over their head, you have to say there, but for the grace of God go I. So when my grandparents came over to this country in the 1930s, we escaped, and so I am very thankful for that. But as you look at the TV and things like that, there, but for the grace of God go I. So I am very fortunate, and I appreciate what I have, maybe as much or more than anybody, and I don't want to minimize that. So I am very fortunate, and I appreciate you and Wealthspire for looking after me and giving me the opportunity to continue to volunteer in the outside world and not necessarily worry about some other things that I could be worried about.
Well, it's very clear you've amplified it in a meaningful way. You've paid it forward in countless ways. So thank you again for, all your years, decades, literally, of service. And thanks for joining the podcast and sharing so openly, about your experiences. It's been a pleasure, Robert.
All right, my pleasure too. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. And good luck to everyone out there. Good health.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Great Aspirations, presented by Wealthspire Advisors, a registered investment advisor and subsidiary company of NFP Corp. If you have feedback, including suggestions for future topics and guests, contact us at clientrelations@wealthspire.com.